Here we are at the beginning of the Mythbusters series, and I don't know if I've ever shared this experience with you before, but there are a lot of times in my life when I'm at the grocery store, sitting at the doctor's office, on a plane, and you strike up a conversation with someone next to you, and they find out that you're a pastor. And it usually goes one of two ways, I often say. Either that totally shuts down the conversation, or people really start talking. And a lot of times when people start talking, I find out, and they share with me pretty openly, that they are SBNRs, spiritual but not religious. And that's a category that's often used in polls these days. And as I talk with them, they explain to me why a lot of times. And much of it has to do with this feeling that somehow the church has become irrelevant. And that a lot of the stuff that they feel like has been kind of foisted upon them by Christianity specifically just doesn't add up to them. And so that's one of the reasons why we feel particularly passionate about sermon series like this. Because it's not just the SBNRs, it's also those of us who have studied, we pastors who have studied these things, who have had these very same kinds of questions. We know you have these very same kinds of questions. And so we feel like it's one of the most important things we do in our teaching and in our biblical teaching, and so we want to keep doing it. We might talk about it in different ways, but this time we want to talk about it as myths that have been layered on our Christian tradition. And so we're going to talk about end times today. Next week, Pastor Pam is going to really delve into the theology around why Jesus died. This notion of, wait a minute, if God created me, us, as people who are less than perfect, then why would God need to send God's child and then kill that child to make me whole again? Something's not adding up there, if that's all part of God's grand plan. So Pastor Pam is going to solve that for us next week in 17 minutes. So you can look forward to that. And then the concluding week, in 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be talking about the myth of redemptive violence. And that is the myth that, and we see it a lot in the Hebrew Bible, and we see that Jesus spoke directly counter to it, but it's a narrative that runs through popular culture and religion today. And that's the notion that if violence is done to me, well then I can settle the score. I can make things even. I can make things all better if I kill you, right? Or if I get back violently in some way. That's going to make things all better. Well, we're going to deconstruct that a little bit and think about Jesus' better way of finding redemption in the world. So that's a little bit about the series. So let's get on with today's topic, which is end times. Now, we've preached about this from a number of angles through the years. You'll hear some stuff that hopefully sounds familiar, but we want to keep peeling these layers back, recognizing that it's really hard because it just pervades our society. We know that books and books have been written about this. Website after website has been launched talking about end times. Most of them are wildly inaccurate. Sometimes the product of you don't know what kind of thinking. Most of them are less than biblical, to put it kindly. Now, some of them you can find are pretty well grounded and think things through a little bit. Some are biblically grounded, but most are not. So we want to look at what the Bible really does have in it. This is not going to be an exhaustive talk today. Obviously, we have a limited amount of time, but we're going to take a look. And so we're going to take a look, like I said before, we're going to take a look at several myths that are out there about end times. And so here we go. The first myth: the end of the world is going to happen something like this. Now, does this sound familiar? The good people are going to get raptured, right? They're going to get sucked up into heaven. I see thumbs up. Praise the Lord. All right. Going to get drawn, the scripture says, caught up in the sky, in the clouds, or they'll just disappear. Those are the people that have lived life right and are in good standing with God. The rest of us saps, though, are going to be stuck here on earth, and then that's where the theories go crazy. Maybe some people say it's going to be 7 years of tribulation. They say there's going to be wars and world wars, and that's going to play out in all kinds of ways. Then that gets us into some of the imagery in the book of Revelation with the four horsemen. The seals are opened, right? The beast and the mark of the beast, the trumpets, Jesus swooping in on the clouds, Armageddon. The visual images are rich. That's a myth, if you want to talk about it biblically. Which leads us to myth number 2. Whoops, I forgot to use my fancy little chart there. This is just one of the things that you can find online that outlines kind of how all this is going to go, and you see how convoluted it can get pretty quickly. And that's because of myth 2. Myth 2 says that the book of Revelation is the definitive account of how the end of the world is going to happen. And that's when you get into things like this, these timelines. But here's the thing. Did you know that the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, has apocalyptic scenarios in it as well? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Zechariah, and most famously, Daniel. They all paint their own, different from what we usually see or hear about in the book of Revelation, different scenarios. This idea that we've been thinking as people of God about what the end of the world might look like is nothing new. These things were written thousands of years before the book of Revelation. In the New Testament, we also see apocalyptic scenarios that look different from the book of Revelation. You can find those in Matthew, in Mark, in Luke, in 1 John, among other places. We're going to look at one in a little bit. Now, I think this is important. And this is important because it shows that at many times, in many places, people of faith have been imagining what it's going to be like. And often this happens when they're under extreme pressure, when it does feel like the end of the world. And they're looking for that reassurance that in the end, it's all going to be okay, just like I was sharing with the kids during our children's time. The important thing to remember here, I think, is that Revelation and the book of Revelation is not the only time, not the only place where in the history of God's people where we read about what really is hope-filled, imaginative writing. Here's another piece of trivia for you. Are you aware that right around the writing of the book of Revelation, there were at least 30 to 40 other apocalypses written, at least, written by a number of other people, all in our same biblical tradition, all related to Judaism and Christianity. Again, the book of Revelation is not the only one. Let's shift gears here a little bit and think about what we see in pop culture again, about Jesus' second coming. Now, we know, here's one that I looked, sorry for the fuzziness of it, but it's fuzzy in more than one way. Even when people try to take all of these, I just mentioned all these other places in the Bible where it's found, some put a really good faith effort into trying to connect these dots across centuries, across languages, across cultures, across political situations, and what we come up with is that it's impossible, because that's not how or why they were written. Now, this is just one example. Again, I say you go online, you can find thousands of these timelines like this, each with the person's own beliefs about how it's going to come together. I thought this one was interesting because it predicted that World War III was going to start on Wednesday, just this last Wednesday, with a nuclear explosion. So I guess sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. And this one didn't quite get it right, thank goodness. Now, I also want to point out that Christianity as a whole can't quite agree on what is going to happen when either. So stick with me for the vocab here a little bit. I'm not going to go into it, but just to let you know some of the vocabulary that goes along with this. There are premillennial, postmillennial, and amillennial viewpoints. There are idealists, futurists, historicists, preterists. There's dispensationalism. There's pre, mid, and post-tribulation rapture. And those can intersect and cross with one another and overlap. So if any of you are mathematicians out there, you could probably tell me how many different possibilities that could create. We're not going to talk any more about any of that today, at least directly. Like I said, the internet is full of it if you want it. So, we've talked about the first two myths. Let's get to the third. The so-called rapture is part of end times. This is where we see that it all starts, right? That's the most common image in our heads of what's going to happen at the end of the world. People are going to get sucked up or just disappear. Now, do you have any idea where this originates? It's in 1 Thessalonians. Now, here's a little piece of trivia for you. How many times does the word rapture appear in the Bible? 0. It appears 0 times. Now, this image of rapture, of people being drawn into the clouds, that's in the Bible. That's in Thessalonians. It's this notion of a great reunion with Jesus in the clouds. But this idea that it was somehow attached to end times is not in Thessalonians. And in fact, that idea was not connected for the first 1,800 years of Christianity. It was only in the 1800s that a British evangelist named John Nelson Darby put 2 and 2 together in his mind anyway. So he started to connect Thessalonians with Revelation and other scriptures. And this is where he put together this idea that there'd be rapture, there'd be 7 years of tribulation, followed by the great showdown between Jesus and the Antichrist. So while it sounds very familiar, this is what we talk about when we talk about things getting layered upon the Bible, things that are not necessarily in the Bible being layered on the Bible. And it sounds familiar to us. It sounds like something that we're supposed to believe as Christians, but in fact, it's not. So, even if one reads the Bible literally, and I think that maybe we should say especially if somebody reads the Bible literally, that popular imagery is not there. Now we're going to get to biblical literalism in just a second, so hold that thought. Myth 4. The end is near. Think about it this way. Everybody who's predicted the end times thus far has got it wrong. Charles Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, a great hymn writer, predicted that the beginning of the end would start in 1836. But he wasn't the only one. It turns out that end-of-the-world predictions in Christianity have been going on essentially since the beginning of Christianity. Now, I know that Wikipedia isn't always a foolproof source for what you want to research, but it was a helpful amalgamator in this case. I was curious how many end-of-world predictions there have been over time, and I know this doesn't cover them all, but I started to look, and so these are just screenshots from Wikipedia. So this is the first millennium. It goes up to the year 1000. And then I kept scrolling down and I got to the 11th to 15th centuries and then the 16th century and it keeps going and then the 17th century and it keeps going and then the 18th century, it keeps going and then the 19th century. What I'm not telling you is that there are 8 more slides that I actually didn't cut and paste just because I ran out of time. And a lot of these folks were theologians, biblical scholars, people who were widely respected, maybe some not so much in that regard. This idea of predicting the end of time has been going on since the beginning of time. So, does anybody know who this lady is? Wow, yeah, you say it like it's like everybody would know her. What's her name? Jeannie Dixon, right. I learned about her this week. It turns out that she predicted JFK's assassination, and she visited President Nixon in the White House, and then she was also, I always heard the jokes about Nancy Reagan and her psychics. Well, Ms. Dixon was one of her psychics, apparently, and she predicted the end of the world as well. Does anybody have any idea what year she predicted the end of the world? It'll sound very familiar, 2020. So, just saying, be careful. Now, I've picked on some of these theories, but I think in all fairness, as people who do want to study the Bible, we also acknowledge that some of these predictions that appear to have got it wrong are actually in the Bible. I want to read to you from Mark. And this might sound familiar to some of you. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains. Skipping forward a little, brother will betray brother to death, and father his child. But in those days following that distress, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man, Jesus, coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all of these things have happened. Similar verses also appear in Matthew and Luke, and there are others in the New Testament that make it clear that many of the New Testament writers thought that the end was near. Did those scripture writers get it wrong? Does our Bible have it all off? What's going on here? Now, this is where I want to get back to literalism just for a moment. To me, it's a reminder that if we want to take the Bible seriously, if we want to read the Bible seriously, we cannot read it literally. Now, I know that makes it harder. I realize, and I think we should all realize, that it also makes it deeper and wider. It gives us much, much more to think about as we think about our relationship with God and as God's people. Because we believe in the life-giving meaning of the Bible and Scripture for our lives today, we are going to continue to work at it. We're not going to ignore the parts that are hard. We're going to look at them, we're going to hold them together, and we're going to work at it together because that's what we do as God's people who take the Bible seriously. So, that's my little literalism tangent. But let's get back to it. Why do you think all these predictions have been made through the eons? I've been thinking about it, and in some ways, it's kind of simple. It's because crazy things happen all the time. Earth-shattering things seem to happen, and no matter the generation. Why wouldn't we see connections to end times when our amygdalas, that reptilian part of our brain that reacts to threats, is constantly being poked and prodded? What's today's scary outbreak? What's going to kill us all tomorrow that we've heard about in the news? Coronavirus, right, clearly. Ellen's at home sick this morning with the flu. Look out, I might be a carrier, who knows? She wasn't in China last week, but we'll see. And then you've got this notion, while our amygdalas are being poked, apocalyptic literature is so full of symbols and these dreamlike and ethereal kinds of scenarios that if you squint just right, it's not hard to find correlations to the here and now, no matter when the here and now was or is or will be. It's easy to find signs that it's the end of the world. But here's the question. Is the world really that much different than when SARS was a disease that was eventually going to kill us all a few years ago? When the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were raging on and dominating the headlines? Or how about this? In 1918, when World War I ravaged Europe, only to be followed up with the Spanish flu that killed 20 to 40 million people. That's apocalyptic. Or maybe it was like in the first century when John wrote his apocalypse while under Roman occupation and after his mother religion's most holy place, the temple, had been destroyed. Or maybe like when the writer of Daniel wrote out of the horror of slavery and genocide and exile in Babylon. Is our age any different? With perpetual war in the Holy Land, earthquakes, climate change, the coronavirus. And by the way, depending on your political persuasion, you can name your very own Antichrist, right? It's funny, but it's serious. It's understandable why these theories gain traction. The images are powerful, and when the world looks like it's crumbling around us, it's really easy to get drawn in. Every generation experiences events that will make us wonder if the end is near. So does any of it matter? Here's myth number 5 in my mind. It's a myth that none of this matters. It would be really easy to dismiss all of this, to dismiss all the false predictions in the past, to dismiss what happened in the Bible, what's written in the Bible, and that those things didn't come to pass, that there are a number of different end-of-world scenarios. It'd be easy to say, oh, that was a pre-scientific time. That's out of date. That doesn't matter. But I think we should take them seriously, and here's why. I think there's a timeless element to these end-of-world scenarios that make me more curious to know what the Bible has to say about them. They have a place for us as people of faith, people of the Bible. And when we study them, we see that each has their own merits, and they all point to something that's really important. The underlying message, the overarching message in all of them is just like what I said to the children. In the end, it will be okay. With God, it will be okay. Whether that's in our own personal lives, whether that's in the world around us, that is the message that cuts through. And I know I said to be really careful last week when we were talking about the Super Bowl and winners and losers, but here's where I'm going to break my own rule. In the end, God wins. In the end, God's way of love and restoration wins. That's what we read in all of these. God will have the last word. It may not be going right now, but it will in the end. Whatever evil is winning the world today, God wins in the end. I want to end with a scripture. It's from Revelation, the one that we know most about. This is toward the end of the end, if you will, the end of Revelation. I saw heaven and earth new created. Gone the first heaven, gone the first earth, gone the sea. I saw holy Jerusalem, new created, descending resplendent out of heaven. I heard a voice thunder from the throne. Look, God has moved into the neighborhood, making God's home with men and women. Death is gone for good, tears gone, crying gone, pain gone, all the first order of things gone. The enthroned continued, look, I'm making everything new. Write it all down. Each word, dependable and accurate. Then God said, it's happened. I am A to Z. I'm the beginning. I'm the conclusion. From water of life well, I give freely to the thirsty. The hymn that we're going to sing in a minute is called New Earth, Heaven's New. And I don't know if I've ever shared this with you before, but Karen and I chose to make that part of our wedding service. And when people hear that and they know a little bit about the song, they kind of scratch their heads and they say, you chose to make an end times hymn one of the pieces of your wedding service? Was that some kind of joke? Well, no, it's not. It's the vision of new earth, heavens new, people made new. In the end, it's all good. When we got married, we knew we were old enough to know that it wasn't all going to be sunshine and roses. But what we did know was this, that when things get hard, we wanted to be next to each other. And so that is why we chose this hymn. When things get hard, we know that in the end, God will win.